Richard, first off, thanks for being on. I really, really appreciate this.
Ryan, it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. You do great work, and you're so well respected in the real estate community that this is great fun for me. And I want you to tell me the key to your success because you've done so well.
Well, I appreciate that. Go on. No, no, I appreciate
I
that very
no,
much. You know,
I appreciate what you do, and I'll tell you why.
okay.
Because I enjoy the fact that you're sincere and you're open and easy to talk to. You know what you're doing, and you're a very hard worker, and I appreciate all those things because for many years, and here's a secret, I was a real estate attorney and
Hmm.
corporate counsel for many real estate brokerages. In fact, my wife was a broker, and that's how I met my wife. Is she was I went to her office and gave a speech to 70 or 80 realtors, and she
Uh-huh.
was she was managing the office, and that's how I met her. So I
Great.
appreciate what you do. I used to train realtors, and I used to give them the E&O pitch and what to do and
Hmm.
what not to do. So when I come across a realtor that's so ethical like you, I really appreciate it. I somehow pivoted into family law, but my real estate background is a good background for what I do.
Well, especially considering now in family law, that takes the finesse and the warmth that you possess, but having the real estate side of it, I think that's what like most of the time I'm sure it's the biggest asset. And so understanding that world and understanding family law, I think that's valuable.
It's a big help. I come across a lot of family law attorneys that don't understand what's involved in the sale of real estate, the documentation, the emotionality.
Hmm.
They don't know how to read a closing statement. They don't know what a HUD 1 is or any of the regulations that apply. So it's a big advantage when we're negotiating settlements or working on premarital agreements or drafting the documents. It's a big advantage.
Absolutely. And I find that a lot of attorneys, they understand the law, they understand real estate, but they don't understand our contracts as much as we do. And so there's a lot of going back and forth. So they say, well, wait a second. We gave a 48-hour notice to perform. And I said, yeah, but you gave it on a Thursday and you need 2 full days. He goes, yeah, now it's end of day Saturday. I said, no, it can't land on a weekend. Well, then it lands, it's end of day Monday. I said, no, Monday's Memorial Day. So it's going to be end of day Tuesday because we go through this so much and any little changes that are made. So,
It's a 16-page contract, I think now,
mhm.
and, and people don't realize how people battle over what this form is going to say and how sometimes it can benefit a buyer or a seller or a lender.
Mhm.
But I am proud to say that there's some language in the agreement that I wrote that
Nice.
yeah, that provides for the fact that the commission, once a seller and buyer sign their closing documents with escrow, and they close, the commission is irrevocable. And
Hmm.
that takes away what we used to face all the time, which was the seller would close and sign and then go back to the escrow agent and say, okay, well, go ahead and record the documents, but hold up that commission because I'm
Hmm.
not really happy with the price or what the realtors did, or I want to negotiate a little bit more. So I'm
Hmm.
proud to say that I put that language in there that the commission becomes irrevocable. So you can
Wow.
I'm proud of that.
I like that. I like it. So I guess I owe you a big thank you.
I think you do. I think you do. And,
Thank you, Richard Sperling.
but I didn't do step two. Step one.
I
Step
see
one
where you're
was
going with this.
step one was give input into the document, but step two was stop doing divorces and premarital agreements and start selling real estate because then you'll make some real money and you'll retire someday. And
Uh,
I didn't do step two, but I did make that pivot from real estate into family law, and I'm happy with it. It just turns out that that's who I am, and that's what I enjoy doing and what I'm good at.
mhm.
So I do it. It's a challenge sometimes. Even in some divorces, we get the husband and the wife, and I'm ready to settle, but the only person that's not ready to settle is the attorney on the other side. So it's but my real estate background helps me a little bit to deal with those personalities. But
That's great.
it can
That's
be a
great.
challenge.
All right, enough about you. Let's talk about me. No, let's talk about some real estate hell stories because in your business, that's got to be a it's a massive thing to deal with because you have so many aspects of it. There's so much money. There's the timing. There's the emotionality of it. So tell me give me a couple stories there.
Well, I'll tell you my most famous one,
Okay.
which was I represented. Uh, let's see, I represented a fellow who built a house, but forgot to pay his lender on the construction loan. So the bank decided to foreclose on the house. They sent over a banker and an attorney to the house, and they were going to foreclose on the house. And my client decided that he was not going to let them foreclose.
Hmm.
So he took them hostage inside the house, doused them with gasoline, surrounded them
What?
surrounded them with candles, and said, I'm going to get on the phone with my lawyer, and we're going to talk to the governor and the Supreme Court, and we're going to make them give me my house back. And if they don't, I'm going to light the two of you on fire, and I'm going to burn you two to death, and I'm going to burn the house down.
Is this
So
real? Or is there a punchline coming?
this is a real story. So
Oh crap!
I'm playing racquetball, and the sheriff in the county in Washington State where I was in walked into the racquetball court and said, "Sperling, you're coming with me." And he put me in the sheriff's car, and we drove to the house where the hostages had been taken. And the sheriff said, "Okay, you and I are going to substitute for these hostages. You and I are going in the house, and we're going to become the new hostages." And I think that would be a good idea, the sheriff said. And I said, "No, I don't think this is a good idea." But at that point, the sheriff's department informed the press that Richard Sperling and the sheriff were the new hostages.
Uh-huh.
So it went out across on UPI, and in those days, all the TV stations and radio stations across the country reported that Richard Sperling and the sheriff were the new hostages, and that we were tied up underneath the house. And of course, my parents, who were in a different state, saw this
What were
on.
they thinking?
It was incredible. Anyway, the long the short story is these two hostages escaped, and my client set the house on fire and shot himself in the head. And the fun part was after the house burned down and he was burnt up, I had to identify him. But
Hmm.
that's you know, I litigated a lot of real estate cases before I started litigating divorces, and
Uh-huh.
I have a great record. You know, I don't think I've lost one divorce case, and I've only lost one real estate case, and that was the real estate case I lost because he ended up unfortunately killing himself and burning the house down. But the hostages escaped, and that was when you talk about real estate hell. That really was real estate hell. You know, but we
Going up in flames. Oh my gosh.
but it just shows you, you know, if you don't make your payments, these lenders really will foreclose, and you can delay and you can file bankruptcy and you can do a lot of things. But one of the things our system is based on is making your payments and making your payments on time.
So,
So
so that's the lesson.
that's
Pay your bills.
you know, it's interesting. That's one of the lessons. The other lesson that I give seminars to attorneys on how to practice ethically and how to keep your sanity when you're practicing family law.
Hmm.
And probably the most important thing we tell young lawyers is to screen your clients.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I'm sure as a real estate professional, you do that too, Scott.
Yeah.
Because if you feel that a person's objectives are not realistic, or they're not willing to be honest and ethical,
Hmm.
that's an important moment where you have to say, "John, I'd really like to work with you, but we need to do this the right way, or we can't work together."
Right. Well, you know, it's interesting, Richard. If someone says to me, "Do I need to disclose?" I don't even need to hear it. The answer is yes. Yes. Yes.
Last
Just
week,
disclose it.
last week I had a dentist come into my office for a divorce.
This sounds like the setup. Every story you tell sounds like the setup for a great joke.
They're not all funny, but the
Okay.
dentist came in and said, "Okay, I'm ready to go. I've interviewed many lawyers, and Richard, I want you to represent me at my divorce." And I said, "Well, doctor, so and so, I'm interested in representing you." And he said, "Well, I brought two books with me. These are my real books, financial records, but these are the financial records that I'd like you to use." And
Wow.
well, I had to say, I'm sorry, and we have to do things the right way. And when we disclose in a divorce, we disclose our income and our assets and our debts. We have to disclose that
Hmm.
information accurately under penalty of perjury, and we have to do
Right.
that right. So watch out. We
Two
haven't talked
sets of
about
books.
we haven't talked about premarital agreements, and people ask me, isn't there such thing as divorce insurance? Because we all struggle to make 5% or 10% or 20% on when we invest in real estate, but when you go through divorce, you say goodbye to 50% of your investment. So isn't there such thing as as divorce insurance? And I say, yes, there is. It's called a premarital agreement. And sometimes we
Mhm.
put these agreements together for people that are already married. We call those postmarital agreements or postnups, but we can put them together so that they're romantic and so that
Mhm.
they're simple and so that they get the job done. And people sometimes say, "Well, I don't need a premarital agreement. I don't have one." And the answer is, well, you do have one, but it's been authored by the state of California. And if
Mhm.
and if somebody dies or you get divorced, uh, your assets and debts are going to be distributed, and your spousal support obligations going to be dictated by the state of California.
Right.
So everybody has a premarital agreement; they just don't know it, and it's a lot better to address it in advance so that, for instance, real estate can be orderly distributed in a divorce without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on attorney fees.
Right. Right. But then you don't get the business, so
Well, that's
you
okay.
need difficult people.
You
Just
know, my motto used to be I'd rather do 10 divorces at 5,000 apiece than one divorce at $50,000.
right.
And so that's probably one of the reasons why I work with the people I do.
Well, that says a lot about you. Do you have another real estate health story?
Well, I used to try a lot of custody cases, and the last custody case I tried was a famous case because the wife sued for custody. She had given up custody of the kids to the husband, and this was in a rural area.
Hmm.
And the wife decided to go back to court and try and modify the custody arrangement. And her allegation, in order to get the judge to change custody, was that the husband had been intimate with his farm animals and that was the basis for changing custody. So that was a famous case. And what came out of that case was a ruling that said if you go through a divorce and you agree to a custody arrangement, and then you want to go back and modify it, there has to be a change of circumstances. And the change of circumstances has to occur after the date of the divorce. It could not have occurred during the marriage. So they did not allow her evidence of what he may or may not have done to
Hmm.
to come into play. So that was a kind of a custody hell. I also was involved in an interesting case. When I got out of law school, I was a criminal defense attorney, and I would prance around the courtroom and raise hell,
Uh-huh.
and I had a case where my partner and I were representing a woman who stabbed her husband 32 times. The defense we used self-defense,
Hmm.
and we claimed that she stabbed him 32 times because she was defending herself. So that that was an interesting case. It was difficult to prove those allegations because, after the first 5 or 10 stabbings, you'd think that the guy would have been slowed down a little bit and he wouldn't have had
It would stand to reason.
that's the reason. So, but that case established an important rule, and that is that if the defendant in a criminal case asserts a defense, then the burden of proof is shifted to the prosecution, and the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the assertion of self-defense is not believable. And so that's
Hmm.
the proof. That was I'm kind of famous for that case because that enabled us to show that even if a wife stabs her husband 32 times, that is sufficient to shift the burden of proof. That we can actually say that stabbing your husband 32 times was a matter of self-defense. We know the other issue was whether it was deserved or not. I can't comment on that, but it was but it was a matter of self-defense.
You know what comes to mind is you should have just played an episode of Monty Python. It's just a flesh wound. I can still walk. Get back here, you sissy.
How about you? How about you?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Oh my gosh.
No, I know.
All right. So a lot of the stories you've been telling, they're I think they're awesome. I think we need a little bit more real estate though, because it's real estate hell. So I just so you know, some names because I keep track of the titles.
Uh-huh.
One of them is called Richard Sperling Taken Hostage.
Oh, nice.
I like that one. The other one is going to be Farm Animals, you say? And then just now, stabbed 32 times. Look at you. And then
Well,
the other one, a romantic prenup.
I'll tell you, a little, some of my business is mediating, and I'm usually representing a husband or a wife or drafting a premarital agreement or a postmarital agreement. But sometimes I mediate, and people ask me how I got into mediation and how I can mediate between a husband and wife, or sometimes between a seller and buyer, because I mediate for the California Association of Realtors, and we try and get people to come to an agreement.
Hmm.
And I know, Scott, you're interested in how I got into mediation and why I'm successful at it. What experience do I have? And
This is exactly, you took the words right out of my mouth.
I figured, and I'll tell you exactly what happened. I
Uh-huh.
put this escrow company together, and we had 6 locations without the north with in the Northwest. And I trained these escrow officers to close escrow. And my job changed from being a real estate attorney or an escrow officer. And what I did full time for many years was they would call me up at one of my offices and they would say, "We have a seller and buyer that are not agreeing to close. They're in a
Mhm.
disagreement." And they would call me up and I would get in my car and on an emergency basis, I would drive to the office and I would meet with the seller and buyer and I would hear them out and come up with solutions for them, and we would solve the problem and get them to close. So the seller got their money, the buyer got their
Mhm.
home, the realtors got their commission, and everybody was happy. And I did this for many years, and then when I decided to be a certified mediator, and I went to the training through Pepperdine and the Strauss Institute, it
Mhm.
turned out that I had mediated hundreds and hundreds of matters because I had traveled around and mediated these seller and buyer disputes for many years. So
Mhm.
that's how I got into mediating, and we're very successful mediating those cases. Other cases that I get involved with, you're probably interested in these Marvin palimony claims that have to do with real estate
Mhm.
are especially in California. I work with a lot of entertainers, a lot of athletes. People live together,
Mhm.
and while they're living together, one or both of them acquire real estate. A lot of the people I work with have acquired 10, 20 houses. They're investors, and then as you know, sometimes these relationships don't work out. The
Hmm.
people break up, and then there may be what we call a Marvin palimony claim, where, for instance, in the Marvin case, Lee Marvin said to Michelle Triola, "Come live with me and give up your job." She was a cocktail waitress
That's right.
and a lounge singer, although there's nothing wrong with that. And he won the Academy Award for Cat Ballou. He acquired 15 rentals. He made a lot of money, and then after 5 years, he decided he didn't want to live with Michelle anymore, and she sued Lee Marvin and said, "You promised that whatever property you acquired while we were living together would be half mine, and whatever money you made would be half mine."
Hmm.
And Lee Marvin said, "You can't gain an interest in real estate just because I buy it, just because we're living together. We have to be married or we have to have a written agreement. Don't you
Hmm.
always have to have a written agreement when we're dealing with real estate?" And Michelle hired an attorney, and the attorney sued and established the Marvin palimony law in California, which says that if
Hmm.
people are living together and a promise has been made, that promise, even if it's verbal, is enforceable. And so I represent a lot of people whose spouses may have made that promise while they were living together. "Don't worry, I got this property through Scott, and it was not a real estate.
Hey, don't bring me into this.
It was not real estate hell. It was a pleasurable experience. We bought the house. It's in my name only because Scott gave me legal advice and told me to put it only in my name." But it turns out that a verbal promise, if it's proven,
Right.
in California is enforceable. And for instance, Michelle Triola proved the promise, and she was entitled to a share. I've got a case going right now where a real estate investor acquired 30 houses while the people were living together,
Hmm.
decided to split up with his paramour,
Hmm.
and she said, "Wait a minute, these houses are 50% mine. You made a verbal promise to me that whatever we acquired while we were living together would be half mine." And he said, "You can't prove that promise." And,
Uh-huh.
and the housekeeper
Oh, here we go.
said, "Oh, yes, Mr. So and so, I heard you make that promise.
Hmm.
I'm prepared to testify." And we found that housekeeper and we got her to sign a declaration. And the result is that his paramour has a very valid and enforceable Marvin palimony claim. So if we're moving in together, just like a premarital agreement is divorce insurance, or a postmarital agreement is divorce insurance, a cohabitation agreement can be insurance against that kind of palimony claim. And in the real estate world, that those cohabitation agreements are very important.
Wow. You know what's interesting? On the surface, you seem like such a sweet, nice guy. But I would never want you on the other side. I, I
Well,
would never. I would never. Because you really, it's.
because you're concerned about family law hell as opposed to real estate hell.
Well, all I can say is that as nice and sweet, and I mean that, and sincere and funny a guy you are, man, you're a badass.
Well,
I'm just saying.
the, thank you, Scott. That's the best compliment you could give an attorney, and I I really appreciate it. My wife, I don't know that my wife would agree with you. She also thinks I'm sweet,
Yes.
but
But we all know better.
I think it's important to do a good job for your client,
Yeah.
and to be goal oriented, and realize that these people have to go on with their lives. They may have to co-parent in the future,
Yeah.
and so I try to be reasonable and efficient and effective,
Sure.
but sometimes we do have to work hard for our clients. And Scott, I'm sure sometimes in negotiating a deal, or speaking sternly to an escrow officer who's not getting the job done, I know you can be very
There.
effective, and
Yes.
I would not want to be on the other side of what you do.
my wife always says, 'cause I came back one time and there was this agent that was just triggering me like crazy because of the way that he was handling things that I thought was unethical. And so I came home and I said, "That motherfucker," I just said this. I mean, I was vicious, no filter at all, because it was just me and my wife talking. And she goes, "Oh my gosh." It's like, "What did he do to you?" Because I don't talk that way, but this particular person really got to me. And
Wow.
then 2 or 3 years later, I happened to see this person when I was out. I had a different perspective on things because I had laid into him pretty hard, and he had laid into me pretty hard. And so 2 or 3 years later, I see him. I go and shake his hand. I said, "You know what? Time really brings perspective. And you know what? There's two sides to everything. And I don't want to carry this around. I'm too old to carry this around." He goes, "Yeah, me too. Me too." We let
Wow.
it go right there. But I was ready to. I literally. I mean, I would never punch someone in the face. But I was. I want. I just. I was really. I was. That the switch had gone off in me. So yes, that side of me does exist. But I like to. I believe there's strength in
Believe,
kindness. I really
hard
do.
to believe, hard to believe. And
Yeah.
but that's the difference between real estate and law. Because in real estate, 2 or 3 years go by, and then you run into the other realtor, and you say, we're too old to do this. It's, let's put it here, and you shake hands. But
Mhm.
with lawyers, 2 or 3 years go by, and you run into the other lawyer, and you say, remember that tough case we had? I, you know, life is too short, and we're getting too old. Let's, I'm sorry if there was an unpleasant or rigorous interaction between us. Uh, Here, let's shake hands and make up, and the other lawyer generally will say, "Screw you," and walk away.
Uh-huh.
So
Oh,
that's
that's
a
so.
that's a difference between practicing family law and practicing real estate.
Is that your landscaper behind you?
It is the gardener who
Yes.
decided to mow the lawn right outside my window at the exact moment of our
It's
podcast.
okay. It's okay. It's good because we already got some really, really great stuff. And thanks for coming and talking to me. I really appreciate you being on the podcast.